Welcome to Team Harrow. This episode, I sit down with Dr. Joe Oravecz, an expert in holistic mental health, helping leaders build resilience from the inside out. Let's get started.
And it's a pleasure.
Thanks for making the trip.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you reaching out to me. And we'll get into your profession and your story here.
Yeah.
But we share a common interest in mental health. I think of it more focusing on like mental toughness.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on the phone, but just trying to create platforms and a ability to make better humans, right? Just to help people,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And mental toughness, mental fitness,
Yeah.
I think is really a segment to which you're here and more are giving grace to. And we really need to go after that because that's the holistic component that when we talk about physical fitness, well, mental health is physical health and vice versa. So how do we use platforms to be able to advocate, to be able to move that forward and across so many different components of our community?
No, definitely. There are all those sayings about, if you kill the mind, you kill the body,
Yeah.
right? And how important it is. If you have a strong mind, you'll have a strong body. And I think a lot of times that's missed, right? People just want to focus on maybe the aesthetics of going to the gym and working out, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I think they work hand in hand a lot, right? Between mental toughness mental health, mental fitness, and physical health, physical fitness, and how they work, right?
Yes, completely. And it is to an extent that some people that get it as far as going in there in the gym, that's what I do every single day as well, is it's stress management. It's I know when I hit a certain time within my workout, if I have anxiety or I'm just trying to think of my mind's going a mile a minute, that I realize, okay, 20 minutes in, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
But if it isn't, then I'm like, something else is going on. But I need to have that in order to set myself for the day. I'm an early morning workout person.
Yeah.
But
I hate that. I hate it. It's great. I'm with you. I try. One of my guests and friend that I had on, Matt Williams.
Yeah.
He has a big saying, "Wake up the sun," and I think his podcast is called that too. And that's their whole thing is they're trying to get in the workout and get after it early in the morning.
Yep.
And I get it, man. You feel great. You've accomplished
Right.
so much. You can check like 3 different boxes.
Yeah.
I worked out. I got my workout in. I'm ready to start my day. I did something tough. Like I've kind of like set the mindset for the day.
Yeah.
That routine.
Yes.
But oh my God, it's like waking up at 5 just is miserable.
5, that's late. 5 is late. Even with kids and everything like that. But it is, again, you get into the routine. And I think that's really the gist of this,
Yeah.
is that if you're in a routine, if you know in a very healthy mindset, growth mindset routine, then you know when you're off.
Yeah.
And what can you control? You can control waking up early. You can control eating healthy. You can control what your schedule is. And that is really when we look about mental fitness and mental health. That's really a key component of recognizing it's like the serenity prayers as well, as just control what you can
Sure.
and let go of what you can't.
So how did you get into this world?
Wow, it's been a journey.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And this is why I think a lot of our similarities to an extent. So for 30 years, I have been the vice president or a vice chancellor, even dean of students at universities across the country. And a first generation college student, which means that my parents didn't go on to college. They provide myself and my sibling and older sister to go on. But first gen is that you're the first in your family to actually complete a college degree. That's an associate's degree, whatever it is. So went on to my undergraduate and had no one was guiding me as far as what I needed to do. Long story there is that I found my niche in a variety of different areas on campus. And from there, I had mentors at the university saying, have you ever thought of going into university administration? No, at that time I thought maybe being a lawyer to an extent, but never guided accordingly. Eventually, they said, well, you can go on for a master's degree, get that paid for through assistantships and such. So I did that at who just won the football championship
OHIO.
Yes, exactly. For the Ohio State University, got my master's, and eventually got my Ph.D. at Florida State. All along my journey was to be able to set up an incredible college experience, and that's why I always lauded to families and students, including student athletes, was that when you cross that stage, I don't want you to have just a college education. I want you to have that college experience, and there's a lot more that goes into that. So part of my portfolio is, besides overseeing the dorms, athletics, D1, D2, D3 athletics, depending upon the institution that I was at, student conduct, community service, enrollment management from admissions and financial aid, I always oversaw student health services and student counseling services. And it was just a passion of me that I realized, and this was way before COVID, clearly way before COVID, but I just knew that that component of that mental health is so critical for the success of our students. And from that, I eventually I never found a life partner to an extent that I was able to share raising a family. And I ultimately I became a foster parent, then adopted my older foster son. And with that comes a lot of counseling, a lot of trauma and such to understand that component. So I had my personal life experiences coupled with university experiences. And then then COVID hits. And then I realized, there's more to, as soon as the world shut down in March of 2020, my gut with no data, nothing here. My gut was, we're going into loneliness, sedentary lifestyle. That emotional connection is going to dissipate. And it's going to significantly impact our students, no matter where they are. Some of them have housing insecurity. They have no place else to go but the residence halls. And so how are we going to manage this? So that, and again, was just my gut. And so from there, all of a sudden, we just realized, the emotional, the loneliness, everything was wreaking havoc. So I was being asked at the university level, how are we managing the students and then welcoming back, bringing them back? And I said, we have rock stars in our student counseling services and student health services. And let me pause briefly here, is that wherever I went as far as university, and if student health services and student counseling services were separated, I brought them together, because that's the holistic piece that don't separate them. And if you can bring them together as a pilot and such, where's the best way to do it? It's a university campus. And so from there, when I was preparing for students to come on back, and one thing also from a student athlete standpoint, we never shut down. The games were played. We were seen as one of the best practices as far as how are you able to manage your games. You're not having any massive outbreaks or anything.
What university were you at the time?
So when I was at Bridgewater State University, so D3 State University, but I was at Syracuse and Salisbury University. Talk about lacrosse, D3 champions.
Yeah.
So my undergrad is at Gettysburg. So as far as the lacrosse, knowing that, had tons of friends that were involved with the lacrosse teams. At Bridgewater State, and we were just trying to see what else do we need to do for our students. And then I did ask the question as I was looking across the country about just employees. I was just like, besides talking about the students and how we're going to help the students, how are we going to help the employees? Because this is significant. And so from at that point in time, I realized, and other people were saying, do you realize that you can do more with mental health and advocacy beyond the university environment? And I think it's part of my value system as well, as that no matter where I lived in the different states of universities I worked at, I always lived in the town where the university sat. So if I was at Ohio State, I lived in Columbus. When I was in Kearney, Nebraska for University of Nebraska Kearney, I lived in Kearney. Well, there's no place else besides Kearney, Nebraska.
Is there anything around there?
No, exactly, right. And even when I was at Salisbury, I lived in Salisbury. So it's something that I firmly believe that when you work at a university that's part of a town, you become a part of that, be it with town governance and such, chambers of commerce. So with that, I realized yes, I can do more. And people are saying, you can do more beyond the university. What does that look like for you? So I expected that I was going to retire in 5 more or 10 more years from a university. It was then through the mental health advocacy, because they said no one else is advocating like you are. You're able to go from the university to talking with legislatures to talking to town councils and such. You're able to do that. I'm like, yeah, and it's authentic to be able to give voice to what we need to do. And even when I'm talking with the student athletes as to let's talk about mental health and what does that look like in your identity and so much, they're like, they say, Dr. Joe, no one talks to us like this.
Yeah.
and I think in a positive way. I'm like, and so so when I was getting that reinforced, it was like, there's more here. So that's when I chose to step back from the university environment to go more broadly. Also, along the way, I was going through my own mental health issues, and COVID wreaked havoc. When you are working on a university campus, that's 24/7. People don't necessarily understand that, but it's a city. And so with that and constantly helping others, and this goes back to a flight attendant analogy of when you're in crisis, putting the air mask on you first, I wasn't doing that. And that's what I realized, even at an executive level and C-suite, that executives don't necessarily think that way.
Yeah.
And so that was another piece that I realized. And I went into a dark tunnel. And I realized I need help. I need help to be able to figure this out. And so I did, and I found an executive mental health residential program that was really focusing on mental health, be it with people that suicidation, anxiety, depression. For me, it wasn't substance abuse. It was mental health. I got there, and in the room with me are CEOs, surgeons, doctors, lawyers, FBI agents, Secret Service, and I'm thinking, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And so with that, I realized after the deep work that was being done that I'm thinking, okay, burnout. How can I advocate about talking to CEOs and at the C-suite level of how do we lead from the top about mental health? So that's kind of a very short story of a very long journey, but that's ultimately now, and given the opportunity of leading NAMI of Broward County. So NAMI is a National Alliance of Mental Illness, overarching oldest grassroots organization in the country. At the time, it was 50 years ago, a group of moms around the table with their children with schizophrenia, significant severe mental illness. This has broadened now for the whole continuum of mental health. Each state has a state NAMI, and then each state is broken down to affiliates or chapters. And each state is done differently. In Florida, pretty much by counties. And so there is Broward County, there's Miami-Dade, there's West Palm Beach, and we each have our own leadership. And so I'm CEO of NAMI Broward. And why I came on down here, and my son is in his own group home for his disabilities now, and to be able to see where it's a good environment for him. And then also what I realize is that, and even with this part of Florida and Broward County, that there's so many amazing relationships that are happening, that I'm talking now with CEOs about how can we talk about mental health in the workplace. That's really what I am doing. NAMI has incredible volunteer programs, which we can absolutely talk about, but where I'm going here is that holistic approach of, if we don't lead from the top about mental health, then the workforce is not going to feel supported. And there's a lot of, NAMI just came out with an incredible research study a year ago, and they're replicating it about where 57% of the workforce have stress-related mental health issues. And globally, $1.1 trillion are lost because of employees having some sort of mental health concerns. And so that's kind of when I want, as I'm talking more to CEOs, saying, this is your bottom line. And I don't know if you're realizing that, or if you are, what are you doing about it? And how can I help?
Do you, from your perspective, I guess, both talking to CEOs and seeing data within businesses, and then also dealing with a lot of young people and students, do you see an upward trend or a downward trend in terms of more people coming forward that have mental health issues? And I guess there's a wider range of that.
Yep. So, excuse me. I so appreciate that question, because that's exactly what I'm talking to some of the CEOs and the C-suite. What I realized being in university life for so many years is that and just recently, most recently being in it, I'm able to articulate, say, I know who you're hiring, and I know what they're expecting. They're very, very comfortable identifying their mental health challenges. They are expecting company A, B, or C to have a good, well-rounded benefits program or culture. When I talk to the VPs of HRs or the director of HRs, I ask your hiring authorities that are hiring these, what's the attitude? And they're like, I'm like, there's a generational divide.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah. So I'm like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it pretty much suck it up? And they said, yeah. I'm like, okay, so how can I help with those conversations? Because you're recruiting this generation. You want to retain this because it costs more to recruit than it does to retain. So how are you creating, how can I help with that conversation with the hiring to recognize we've got to do something differently? Yes, we were raised as far as suck it up. It's not something that we talk about and such. And that's the problem.
But, well, let me ask this. There is a, how do I say this? There is a benefit to the methodology or the mindset of suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes with being mentally tough.
Yeah.
But maybe, and I'm assuming this, maybe the break is the break in communication, or the issue is like, look, you need to suck it up. You need to deal with it. You need to be able to understand that this is happening and there's nothing you could really do. Suck it up. Mm-hmm. Move on.
Yep.
You can talk. And so understanding that and talking through it, is that something that's just not like understood? Like,
yeah, there you go. So there's a way that you can approach it, because there's values to which an organization needs to thrive on, right? And that's kind of where that's even on the onboarding process, as far as we have expectations, okay? Where along the onboarding process and then beyond that are we acknowledging the holistic employee? And that's a different frame.
Yeah.
You know, because that has not been talked about. And knowing that as you're hiring it, that in college and universities, it's talked about on the field, it's talked about in the classroom, because that is the environment now, as far as understanding. Because even in K through 12, there are more conversations, and I think what I have found, that even in public education and in private education too, and that they're saying there's a lot more issues with mental health and such. And I put a little bit more of a twist on that, saying, or a different perspective, not a twist, is it that there's more issues, or is it and we're talking about it more overall?
Yeah.
So of course there's going to be more compared to where we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So that's fantastic that we're talking about it more. And now that it's out in the open more, how are we doing it, or how are we working through it? I guess it is really, and how are we educating ourselves about it?
Yeah.
Because it's a continuum.
Yeah, I mean, the education piece, you keep talking about it, of, identifying mental health issues, talking about it, connecting people, the holistic approach. But at the end of the day, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, what is, like, how, and I guess we could use you as an example, or myself, how do you build mental health? How do you build mental toughness? Because like you were saying, you have a lot of students coming out of university, a lot of young people, and it's more identified or more openly spoken about mental health. You have someone that's leading an organization. They have two very similar looking employees in front of them. One is mentally stronger, or maybe has been identified, or you can see maybe on the resume that he's not going to complain, or is going to be able to suck it up and move on, or can deal and understand and process stuff, compared to somebody that is maybe already a red flag or looking for mental health help. Like you would only be doing the student a benefit to teaching them how to, I know we keep saying suck it up, and there's probably a better term for that, but
it's real.
Yeah, but it's real. Learning how to suck it up and deal with life. Like learn it now, because later on in life it only gets harder.
Right, exactly. And I think that's where the authenticity and the vulnerability helps with being a leader as well. So and even for me, as I have struggled and succeeded, I'm at a point where I'm comfortable sharing my story. That takes a long time to get there. We're all not perfect, and we have struggles. And I think that's where I am finding and having conversations with CEOs is how have you given yourself permission to share what your struggle has been? And that's clearly with the, the A-style personality is just like, we're going to go, and no show any falter and such like that. But we know now, and especially when you see celebrities and athletes, professional athletes, showing more about that vulnerability, and that creates a real person people are able to identify and saying, oh my, and then by showing that, you're empowering others to be able to say, well, if he was able to talk about it, I feel safe now, and I want to talk about it as well. And that's what I did. When I went on my wellness leave, I indicated to my team, it's just like, I'm doing this. I'm walking the talk. I'm not being performative. And when I come on back, it's going to be a slow healing journey. And my hope even for that would be someone else would be able to say, if he was able to do it, I'm going to do it too. So with your role as a leader, you have the power.
Yeah. It's a fine line as a leader though, because, and like everything you're saying, it really hits home, because obviously the athletic piece, what I dealt with, the recovery and the mental aspect of that, but I'm sure, or I assume that you've read about it or heard about it, especially in the military, during the GWOT in the past 20 plus years of the global war on terror, this military overall, not just special operations, but a lot of it fell in special operations, was just getting burnt out with deployment after deployment after deployment after deployment, divorces, deployments, pre-deployment, you're never home. And it takes a lot of wear and tear. And dudes were just getting mentally smoked. And as a leader, I know it's tough, because you're getting told like, hey, you just got back. Great. Go take your mandatory 3 days leave and, decompress, whatever that is, to deal with that. And then we're going to get right back in the swing of things and get ready to deploy again. And in 6 months we're going, and then you're going to be gone for another 6 to 9 months. And it's just a continuous cycle. But as a leader, you're thinking, all right, this is my job. I have to get everyone ready to deploy. We're going. So getting told by people, man, I'm just not mentally able to do it. In the beginning, I think a lot more were like, hey, dude, sorry, you gotta go. Either you leave or you go. I think later on it got to more of a point like you're talking about of like, hey, this is like a real thing. And just like if a dude has a rolled ankle or a blown out knee or some sort of health issue, like physical health issue, mentally, if they're not there, then they probably shouldn't deploy.
Right. Right. And that's kind of why do we treat physical ailment differently, or why do we treat mental health issues differently than physical?
Yeah.
And that is the larger question.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my platform is how do we? And because we need to first talk about it and having these sort of having these intentional conversations, because it's not going to change. It's not going to go back to normal, whatever normal was. And with the generations now, it's just like, okay, the workforce is changing.
Yeah.
How do we do that? Another component, when I was at the university, part of my portfolio was always military and veteran student services. And Dad, God bless him, he's 91, Korean veteran. And as I was talking to our students that were returning back, I'm just like, we need to make sure that you are in a good place. And I don't know what that means. And you all, however, collectively, let's pull all the resources together and to be able to help you, guide you through what that is coming from the field, from combat, to be able to then say, well, I want to go back to get a degree and such. I'm like, that's significant changes. And we need to talk to the faculty. We need to talk to a variety to understand there's so much here. And how do we support holistically? And so that's, I think, having that experience for me allows me in conversations to try to put myself into other people's shoes. I will never be able to do that, but it's just the conscious awareness that I didn't experience what you've experienced. However, that empathy is really important.
Sure.
And how can I as a leader articulate that and show that? So because no matter where you go as a leader, people are always watching you. I'm not doing it. I'm being authentic.
Yeah. Leading with empathy.
There you go.
I mean, there's several books about it.
Yep.
You know, you could take a semester of college like about that whole topic.
Yes.
Yeah. About being a leader with empathy. Yeah. You know, it's important as a leader to be able to connect with your subordinates and the people that are asked to follow you. You know, that's a big piece that you learn at West Point is, you know, how are you able to stand in front of a group of people and tell them to go take that hill, knowing that, you know, 50% of them are going to get killed, right? Or possibly. Right. And it's being able to connect just enough to have that relationship to lead with empathy, but not enough where it's going to influence your decision making in terms of like strategic mission success.
Completely.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to take on as an individual.
Yeah.
You know, no matter where you are. And I think even for me, when I was a vice president, crisis management was absolutely part, and that is student suicide, you know, or whatever that might be, that I'm the one that I need to make sure, how are we helping the students? How are we helping the staff that are impacted? I mean, clearly the families.
Yeah.
And then the circles of influence. So that empty seat in the classroom, that faculty is teaching that class. And so all of that, how do we navigate that? You have your team that helps think that through. But when you have a college campus is a small city, as I said prior. And so it's just not one crisis a year. It's multiple. So those are the other things that as a leader, how are you managing that? Are you compartmentalizing? You can over compartmentalize. And I think that was to an extent what I was doing too, is that you don't want to have so much of your emotions attached to it, because then you're just going to go, it's going to be incredibly draining.
Yeah.
So it's how do you manage? So all these different things that you're not taught of how to do all of that. And then eventually that's kind of where I am always now leading and talking with C-suite and such, saying, how are you managing this? And it's okay to talk to a professional about it, because your family, your partner wants to absolutely help and be there. And they are. However, they don't fully understand.
Sure.
And that's where it's lonely at the top.
No, it's definitely lonely at the top for sure. But getting back into like more than just talking about it, and, you know, identifying resources and talking about mental health. And like I said, we'll use you as an example. What are some of your maybe daily rituals or things that you do to instill mental health in your life, mental toughness?
Yeah. So taking the continuum of the day, absolutely, it is the working out. And for me, if it's training for something, so right now I am training for, I do Spartan sprints.
Okay.
So the Palm Beach Spartan Sprint is coming up at the end of March. But that's something that I like to kind of have that goal, and to be able to say, okay, even with my age and so forth, am I able to hit it? Okay, let's kind of do it. So long, always for those is that so long as there's no injuries. And I'm good. And then for meditation It is more readings that I like to do. Those 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs. There's a couple books I like to do, kind of that daily journal. I don't journal. For me, that's not. I don't like to do that. Others, absolutely. Eating well, I have to do that because I know that what goes into the body it is holistic.
Yeah.
And kind of all of that. I have really good faith. And then for my vocation, music is my background. So singing with a variety of ensembles and such is something that I've learned. Not only is that community, so it's always finding your people and what that is, because you need to decompress. So it's not always the same group of people too. And that's one thing that I realized even in college, that I thrived on not just the fraternity or for a particular ensemble, or if I was an RA, well, that's to an extent. So I did all of those because they were different people. And so I realized at a young age that strengthens me and perspectives to be able to do that. So that's what I'm doing now as well. I love to travel, and the outdoors is something that I thrive on. When I was in Montana, my son and I absolutely went every single weekend was hiking or fly fishing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
So stuff like that, is that when you talk to, I guess, CEOs or even, I guess, more so with the students, like the physical fitness piece, do you use that as like a tool of like, hey, like, you know, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. Here's an outlet, not only just an outlet. And I've always felt like exercise is an outlet to deal with emotion, but it's a tool that you can sharpen to help you deal with stress.
Yeah, it's tools. It's coping mechanisms, and that's why even with if you're going through a significant mental health journey or just a temporary crisis to an extent, it is the ability of what are the tools in your toolbox for your coping skills. And for me, I recognize, and you go to a variety of these different programs, yoga, stretching, working out, walking, all of that. Yes. And so that's kind of where that physical component is what what happened with us in COVID.
I was about to ask.
Yeah,
I was about to switch to the COVID discussion.
Was sedentary. I refused as soon as we were going to lockdown. I was working with a trainer at the time. I was like, I am not sitting on my rear end. I'm not doing this. I need to keep moving. And he's like, we're going to work through this out. You can pick up the weights at the gym. And I had at the time, an elliptical at the house. I'm like, okay, so I need to keep that moving. I need to walk the dog and such, because I could just see this. I can just sit and munch. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I don't know.
Humans are not made to do that way.
Right.
Like, biologically, we're just not made. It's not in our DNA to just sit. And I think when COVID happened to society, you really saw talking about tools. When COVID happened, you really saw who had sharpened tools in the drawer, right?
Yes.
Like yourself.
Yeah.
Like myself.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I already had my routine.
Yeah.
It didn't stop me.
Right.
I continued to work out. I was very annoyed because I had joined the YMCA in Bethesda, and they had a sauna, and I used to love doing the sauna like after workouts. And I just felt great.
Yeah.
And then they opened back up the gym, so I was able to like go and like lift heavy weights again, but they closed the sauna, and I was like, man, the effing stupidity here. Like, this, don't you guys understand? Like, this is helping people with health. Like,
yes. Yeah. And that's kind of, as we were reemerging, kind of just seeing then the sedentary lifestyle and the toll that took on everyone was just so significant. So that's where even my mindset was. And I was one of two in the university administration building that did not go virtual. And this went with my own value system, is that we've got 3,000 students living on campus. I'm not going virtual.
Yeah.
It was me and the president.
I mean, there's something to be said if you look around, and I'm not trying to be political, I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just going to make the observation. The majority of the people that either are still wearing masks or scared of COVID, which that's their thing. And even during the time when more people were worried about it than others, those people that were more worried about it did not look like they were in great shape. You know what I mean? Like, going back to the physical piece there, it didn't seem like if you cared about your health, if you worked out, if you ran, you probably were more on the side of, well, I don't want to run with a mask on. I'm doing the best I can. I'm staying in shape. I'm, staying away from people, whatever we're doing, 6 feet.
Right.
But it wasn't usually the person that was the Adonis wearing the mask and a face shield saying, separate.
Right. And I think that goes back to just your routine.
Yeah.
And in that if you were already primed for that you knew you were going to try to work something out. And if that meant that I'm going to find a time where I can run on the sidewalk and no one is around and I can do it without a mask. Because, that was a lot. I was just like, I wasn't going to be on the elliptical with a mask.
Yeah.
So, like, what else can I do?
Can you imagine?
I'm like, what can I do? So that's the other, when you're thinking crisis management or a way in which we're wired, that we're just thinking, how can I make this work? I don't want to impact somebody else.
Yeah.
This is my choice. I want to be able to do it. So how can I do that? And so I think that really goes back to mental health too, is recognizing if and when you are in crisis or something's going on, if something's off. And that's really what I felt as far as even with, and I never ever thought, Ben, that I would be diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Never in my life. And because that's somebody else. I got it together. I know how to handle this and so forth. And it was until when I broke and it was a suicidation that came out of nowhere. And that's what's scary.
So is that thoughts of suicide?
Yeah. So suicidation, it was more or less that am I better off? Is this world better off without me?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's so interesting because like biologically and going back to like the science of it, I feel like the human instinct is to survive, right? Like it's very interesting to watch people get shot or blown up and what they can endure and how much the body wants to keep on living. But then at the same time to hear like your story of like, I just had these thoughts of like, maybe the world is a better place without me.
Yeah.
That it's.
Am I, because I had a colleague that questioned my value. And I never had that before. And then the thoughts started spinning out of control. So I didn't know that I had a lot of anxiety. I didn't know that this would, because I was just like, I didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And for me, when that just started happening, I realized that few hours later, I'm not shrugging this off. It happened once. And it was just like this Mack truck. And here I am always talking to others and the students saying, if anything, we have support systems in place. We have this, you make that call. So within hours, I realized I have to make the call. Because I need to walk the talk and do it. And so that's where, for me, I realized, I guess this is what it feels like. And so I called a trusted colleague, an expert, saying, I need help.
Yeah.
And then it was like on the Autobahn is trying to find where and so that's kind of when I then started researching as far as, for me, and it wasn't substance abuse, it was mental health, that I need to be in a place where there's professionals, executives, because I think this is where the core is. And so it was hard trying to find the right place. And thank God I did. And they did a whole assessment and they said, this is what our program is. And because I did a deep dive as far as the qualifications of the therapist and who else, and it was an amazing opportunity because there were tracks for professionals. There was also tracks for veterans and first responders, and there were tracks for athletes. That is who was there. And it was remarkable as far as when we would have conversations together and identity and kind of enmeshment with who we are as professionals and personal, personally with your family. And with that gave you more grace and space to realize, okay, there's others like me. And so how do we move through? And that goes back to the tools in your toolbox. And so when you talk about mental fitness and mental toughness, you might not have all the tools in your toolbox. All right, let me learn. So that goes what I call, there's a theory of growth mindset. I don't know it all. However, I'm ready to learn. And so how can I get those tools and sharpen those tools so that for me it doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I always want to lead with that here's my story. Never thought it was going to happen. However, I've learned now, and similarly, when you go into the gym for the very, very first time, you're scared, but then you get into routine. And like, I get it, and I can be better. Even here, 1% better every day. And so, okay, how am I going to manage through this? And this is to an extent, even with working with my son in his therapy, as well as just like, okay, we can give everyone at work, at home, whatever community organization that we're a part of, we can give people the tools.
Yeah.
That's meeting someone halfway.
Yeah. The growth mindset is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think I have a growth mindset. You're talking about just get in the gym and do it,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I think probably one of the first times where I realized like, all right, you just got to do it. You just got to go, right?
Yeah.
Was stepping into the gym the first time, it wouldn't even have been high school, probably would have been like middle school, and just like you're around, you see the big high school boys, and that's what you want to be,
Right?
And there's only one way to do it, and it's down this path and hard work and working out in the gym, and that growth mindset of just, and it leads to, if you can have a good growth mindset and understanding like, all right, it starts somewhere, you just got to do it. That I think leads into the ability to suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can suck up the awkwardness, if I could suck up the uncomfortableness, if I can suck up the unknown and know that, all right, today it's awkward and unknown, and I'm coming in and doing a podcast for the first time, and the lighting's all fucked up, and I'm missing my cues, and I'm talking too far from the microphone, and I don't know how to edit anything. And the first time that I put together shorts, it takes me 6 hours. And but the next time it's going to take me 5, and the next time the lights will be right, and the next time I can just walk in here and bam, let's go. Let's sit down and talk and knock out a podcast. And it translates to other things where, the first time I had to have like a business meeting in the civilian world outside of the military. Obviously, I've talked to generals, I've talked to politicians, I've talked to warlords, I've talked to tribal leaders, I've talked to important people before wearing the uniform. But on the other side of the fence, on the civilian sector, it is kind of totally different. Like you can't just walk into the room anymore, and because you have a beard and you're the SF guy that everyone knows about, like everyone, ooh, all eyes are on you. Let me go shake this guy's hand. You're not the center of attention. You're just like this new guy, either in a wheelchair or walking around with no legs, like sitting in a room with a bunch of people in suits, and you're a nobody, right? But it's unknown and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the more that you get out there and shake hands and meet people and build your network, it just becomes more of a fluid thing.
Yes. And with that is to continue building your confidence, as far as we all are experts in nuanced ways.
Yeah.
And for me, that took a long time to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Because yes, for me, a lot of the different times being at different universities or whatever it is it was in my life, that I was intimidated until I realized, wait a minute, and this comes with life experience too, that I bring something to the table. So, and that's for me now, in talking about mental health too, is that there's not a lot of people that are doing this, and I realize that. I'm like, so God has given me this opportunity. That's where my faith comes in. And what can I do? And because it can be incredibly intimidating giving testimony to our elected legislators. But then I realized, wait a minute, I know more than they do here. So
it's a confidence piece.
Yeah,
if you can, and as a leader, if you can instill confidence and show confidence, even if you're not that confident, you're still doing it
completely.
And, I try and do that now with my kids and like teaching them confidence. There was a saying, I was just talking with a friend from high school. I saw him this morning. He was actually a teacher when I was there, but we've recently reconnected and been friends. And we're talking about where we went to high school, place called Woodbury Forest. And it just jogged my memory talking about confidence. One of my favorite t-shirts that they sold at Woodbury, or the boys sold, probably wasn't authorized by the school, but it said, "We're not cocky." and on the back it just said, "We're just better than you."
Oh yeah.
And it's not
probably wasn't authorized by the school, but I'm sure you guys sold a lot of them too.
But it's, obviously it's a joke and there's some cockiness and arrogance to that. But there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And if you're confident, like you just know that you're going to win. I was like, I'm not trying to be an asshole about it. I just know I'm going to beat you in this race, right?
And also what I realized too is you have confidence. However, for me, when I am advocating and I'm talking with others, I realize I can't do this by myself. I need your help. And with your help, I can help you too. So this goes back to how are we making society a better place with our lived experience, because there's others that are scared to give their own voice. So we are empowered. We have the power to do that. And that's kind of the other piece too that I realized about the whole mental health and advocacy is, all right, who else at the table is going to be talking about this? And I think even as an years ago, I was elected as a Board of Education trustee when I was in Montana. And I realized, and I was asked to run for that because I was on another committee for the community. And I realized I have power with my voice and I need to leverage that appropriately. And how can I do that? So I think that builds the confidence in realizing, even at the university in a vice president role, that I realized every word I said was going to be looked at by all different components and demographics and so forth. And I needed to make sure in my role there that every single student that was enrolled could see me as an advocate, regardless. And because they needed to see that, how can I role model that? For me, I'm constantly learning, and that goes back to the growth mindset. I will independently make my own decision, whatever my next choice will be. However, it is as we grow, when we're talking about then mental health and such, we need to realize that we don't know what Ben has gone through yesterday, or what Joe's son's diagnosis is. And this kind of, I want to bring it back to what I realized, and as I'm talking with CEOs, and later today I'm doing a presentation to a company, that we're talking about stigma-free workplace. And even language that is used. I'm not going political correctness here, but what it is that you don't know when all of a sudden you're saying, gosh, why did you just go so schizo on me? You have no idea if my son this weekend was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So these are certain things now that it's not to be, I don't want to be interpreted, we have to be so sensitive. It's more or less, it's awareness.
Yeah.
And that goes back to how is our workforce showing up to work, because presenteeism is when people just show up but they're not there. Yeah. And we're losing our ROI. So there's so many different components bringing it back to that confidence is understanding that there's power behind the words.
There's power behind the words. I would think that there's a balance between being too politically correct and soft and being too rough about it, right? Yeah. Where you shouldn't be calling everyone a schizo because you don't know. Right. But at the same time, if somebody says you're acting like a schizo, you should be able to, all right, man, like, you don't know that my son's schizo. I'm going to take a step back and understand that and like mentally, all right, like, shrug it off and like, that's just funny. Hey man, just letting you know, like, my son's schizophrenic. Like, it's not cool.
That's the component that you want to give people power to be able to say that. Yeah. So it's creating a safe environment. Yeah. That even if, if you're having that conversation, that if you have that response saying my son's schizo, for me, I'm hearing then you've created an environment that's good, that you're able to come back with that. Yeah. As opposed to a chilling effect, where it's just like, I'm not going to say anything more.
And I don't know why, but sometimes it feels like we as a society, and I think that now with the elections and the way it's, like every year it kind of leans left and then leans right. It's a seesaw. And we're going more to central to right. Before it was more left of, there is so much political correctness that it almost inhibited us for growth.
Yeah.
right?
And I think with that is kind of the mindset, and that's kind of where, you know, even working on a university campus, as far as for me was and even now in the community, as I'm advocating and across different lines and such, to be able to kind of think, how can I talk through what there might be differentiation or dissonance of it. I'm just like, because for me, and this is why I really appreciate the mental health sector, is that it crosses all lines. It
does.
And so that's where I'm like, okay, this is a really good, I've yet to have a conversation with someone that say, we don't want to talk about it, or it's always, and we need to talk more about it. I'm like, fantastic, regardless of, again, cultural or political differences and such. That's what I truly appreciate. Now I'm like, all right, let's have the conversations, and collectively, how are we going to make a difference here?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's the big thing, is just being able to have the conversation, right? Because usually when you're able to sit down with somebody that is, you know, gung ho on one side and you just feel gung ho on the other, usually when you sit down, like, cooler heads can prevail, and you're like, oh man, like, you're not that much different than I am, right?
Right. And that is clearly, as I'm having more conversations in all the different components of the community about mental health, it is, how do we give more attention to this, or how can we help? And that's, for me, is I want to drive the conversation in the particular segment that people are coming from. So if it's from the fitness industry, you're going to be able to say, okay, so, you know, how are we helping, you know, even giving grace to when we talk about, if we're having yoga, or if we're having the Pilates class, or we're having the kickboxing class, how can I talk to some of the instructors and saying, okay, who's comfortable here talking just about mental health and physical health? Let me help you, because I bet you there's going to be a few people that are taking that class that will completely resonate with a few words that you're going to say, that this is going to help with your coping skills, or this is going to, and not just be performative, but kind of a little bit of more of an understanding as far as how it all connects, because it goes back to the holistic component.
Yeah.
And these are just, if I can kind of, you know, there's that story of the starfish story, that a kid is walking on the beach, thousands of starfish are on the beach, and he's just picking up one, throwing it back in the ocean, picks up another one, throws back in. And a gentleman comes over and saying, you're never going to make a difference here. You've got thousands of him. Kid picks up it, tosses back in the ocean, and says, made a difference to that one.
Yeah.
So with that story, in that visualization, is like how we have the ability of having that one conversation and just saying, how are you doing? And not just walking down the street and saying, hey, how are you doing? But when we have that with a colleague, with a loved one, with a person in the community organization that you're a part of just taking space and saying, you doing all right? Because I care.
Yeah.
And then owning it, saying, I've had a really rough day, and this is kind of what I'm doing, because I'm taking ownership. And then it starts to give permission for another one saying, well, yeah, I'm kind of struggling. Okay. You know, and what do we do? And then that's a whole nother conversation, because I do trainings and such to be able to, how do you help with those conversations?
Do you know a guy named Dr. Nate Zinzer? He ran the Center for Enhanced Performance up at West Point.
Oh my gosh. I know that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dr. Zinzer, Dr. Z as I knew him, and still know him, he ran the CEP up at West Point. And as anyone could use it, and as an athlete, you know, is kind of more pushed towards you.
Known. Yeah.
And I remember going there, and Dr. Z was great in terms of, you know, you learn about being a college athlete. You already have a trainer. You already have these documented workouts that you're doing. They're getting you ready for the season. But never before had I experienced something like at the CEP, the Center for Enhanced Performance, where like, all right, that's great. but now we're going to make you mentally tougher, right? Like, how are we going to strengthen your mind? Like, how are we going to get you not just like mentally tougher, but in like the right mindset, how to like start to click in, how to be ready for the game.
Yeah.
What are little cues that you can use to get you ready? Positive reinforcement. Like, are you telling yourself the right stuff before a game?
Yes.
Are you telling yourself anything before a game? Why are you not talking to yourself before a game? Like, so I'm going to teach you how to do that. And, I remember before, maybe it was my junior or senior year, we all went up there, the defense, collectively, I think it was the defense, we went up there and we had to write down like the 3 things that you want to accomplish this season. What are your goals? How are you going to get there? And they made these like CDs that you would listen to, and you'd sit in the egg chair, which basically looked like an egg, right? And you would sit there and just like for like 10, 15 minutes before a practice or a game, get in like the right mindset of positive reaffirmation. And it was just them telling you this voice of like, you are the fastest player in Division I lacrosse. Like, you will get every ground ball. Right. You will go undefeated this season, right? Like, I am strong. I will push people down the alley. I will never be bodied out. And it was just something like really, I was like, man, there's something to this.
Yes. And with that, and he was on the cutting edge for that, because you'll see more and more, even at D3 schools, that the sports psychologists, that I know when I was at a few of the institutions and overseeing counseling services, if we had the ability of having a licensed counselor in counseling services, but also had the sports psychology to connect them with the director of athletics and the coaches, was just, we couldn't have enough.
Yeah.
And that's the value of, in my role as the vice president there, of really recognizing the student athletes and so much that goes on. And I spoke to every single team. If we had 23 sports that at the beginning of each season, and I talked to them about not only what does it mean to be an athlete, but a student athlete, and the holistic approach, because they hear it from their coaches, they hear it from the athletic stuff, but they weren't, and I knew you're not hearing it from a vice president. And I wanted to make sure that they understood that we value what you do. It's incredibly difficult to balance all of this.
Yeah.
And you do it exceptionally well, because your GPAs and how you're role models for not only your peers that are not student athletes, but then in the community when you're volunteering with the kids and such, it is, and you are put on a pedestal as well, rightly or wrongly, but you are the brand of the university. And if anything happens, the top of the fold, when we had newspapers, it's always going to be lacrosse player from West Point, or, and I'm like, and that's really hard.
It happened at Duke.
Yes.
Happened at Duke, and those kids got crucified
completely. Exactly. Yeah. And then we saw what the result was afterwards for that. And what I related to is that, and similarly, and I asked the students that if you see me as a vice president, and you clearly had the freshman players and then the senior players, and I said, okay, if I'm in the grocery store, aisle 3 on Sunday afternoon with my son, am I Joe Oravecz, who just he's shopping, or am I Dr. Joe, the vice president at the university? Freshmen typically say, well, you're Joe. Seniors correct the freshmen, saying, no, you're Dr. Joe. And I'm like, bingo. Similarly, exactly as how you are as a student athlete. There's just so much, and that goes back to the mental fitness and the mental toughness. And you're too young at that point to be able to understand and have people connect the dots. And that's where I firmly believe that the more that we were able to provide people the skill sets and that goes back to sharpening the tool, getting the tools, sharpening the tools, to then to be able to say, then what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
It's that carpenter, it's that artist mentality of that you have the ability, and I can, as a coach, can only take you so far. You need now to move through it. And so that's when I go back, even with companies and such, that if they have they should benefit programs in EAP or mental health counselors and such, it's just like, take advantage of it. And I will say, I am, and I'm learning from that, and I have to learn what my coping skills are. There was a couple of years ago when there was a staff member that was just saying, well, I need reminding, and I have some disabilities and such that, and I had a former supervisor that had to remind me of certain things. I'm like, okay, but you know what you need to do. So how are you utilizing the tools
Yeah.
that you were given to do that? And for me, I do the same with my son. I'm just like, I'm not going to be around for
Yeah.
your entire life. So it's always, I approach it for teaching people how to fish. So how do we, from a mental health, a mental strength, mental fitness standpoint, how do we accrue those skills? And then you need to do it. You
Yeah.
need to do the work. And it's not easy.
And a lot of people don't like to do the work,
Right.
you know? And I think at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down
Yes.
to is it's the individual, you know, like they have to put in the work. You can only push them so far and teach them so much, but they're the ones that have to have the right self-talk, the right rituals, be able to instill confidence in themselves. You know, there was something I saw the other day. It was on Instagram, a guy public speaking, like a coach talking to a team. And I loved it because he said, I can teach you how to be the best, whatever sport it was, football player. I can teach you all the drills. I can teach you what right looks like. I can teach you how to put your cleats on. I can teach you how to play the game, but I cannot teach you effort. And at the end of the day, that's the one thing nobody can give you or teach you. It's something that you have to figure out on your own is effort.
Yes. And that goes with when we're talking about where our workforces are going and going back to the mental health, it is that how do we create that environment that I'm supportive? I have every other week, I have my therapist appointment, and vulnerable, authentic, and we need to do it. It takes work.
Yeah.
It takes work to show up, to do what you need to do that you've been hired to do. And we're going to support you holistically as well. And how are you going to do this? So it's the kind of accountability factor.
Yeah.
And that's kind of learning that. Sometimes people haven't fully learned that. And that's kind of our role as leaders and such, to give that grace, because that's one thing. And with the COVID component is that with the COVID generation, by no fault of their own, being at home, schooled, and so forth, they didn't have the senior prom committee. They didn't have the senior football game. They didn't have that experience. So no one taught them how to do that.
Yeah.
So that's the other lens that I'm looking through in that generation, is that, okay, if they don't have that skill set, or they don't have that confidence or whatever, I'm thinking, hold on here. They might really haven't been taught it as well.
Yeah.
And so with that generation, and going as far as the suck it up, I don't know if they've been taught first of how to do that.
Yeah.
And because the teachers didn't have the ability to do it. So that's a little bit of grace that I'm giving to be able to say, okay, it's a little bit more effort on our part because we have a life experience. We're older to be able to draw upon how am I going to get through COVID.
Yeah.
They have 18 years, 19 years. They don't have that experience. So that's the other component that I'm always trying to inform some of the HR directors too, that just don't think that they've had the same experience as we have.
Yeah. That's interesting to think, like, you know what? Maybe they just don't know how to suck it up.
Yeah.
And what that really means. And you have to teach them what that means, and not just be like, hey, dude, suck it up, buttercup.
Exactly. And so you take that approach and like, this is an amazing opportunity for us and our onboarding to really teach what that is as far as the values of our organization.
Yeah.
We believe in this. And to be able to get, even asking that feedback, as far as, have you ever been taught this? The first time when I did a performance evaluation and I changed the term to actually a success and development conversation with a younger professional. And I asked, have you ever had this sort of positive conversation and growth? And they said, no, because it was just my gut thinking, I'm the teacher here, the coach, to be able to help set them up, because I want them to have a positive experience. So as they move on in life, they can look back upon working for us and saying, that was a really good experience. And I want to replicate that because as I'm a leader, because I had such a good experience. Similarly, when you have a great coach, that you're like, if I could coach like him, or if I could coach like her, that would be amazing. And so that's the similar, that you're in life, you're coaching. And how do you do that in a very positive and empathetic way?
No, that's awesome. So where can people find more about you and learning to have you be their coach?
Well, I appreciate that. It's kind of, hopefully you put on the website, because joeoravecch.com is where I ask people to go to. And from there, there's a couple of different ways that I can help. One-on-one. There's also executive group coaching as well that I've found in my own personal experience. And I have a few cohorts that pulling people together that have that already experience, that they just don't have a safe space to talk about it.
We could do a joint one where they come and train with me and I throw them in the ice bath to deal with that.
Yes.
And then they come out and talk to you about their feelings about how much that sucks.
Yeah, completely. But it's just like, oh, I can feel that, because that's a whole nother podcast episode, because I firmly believe, and that's even when I was in my own personal retreat, it was that holistic. It was absolutely, we were training. We did have the jacuzzi. We did have taking hikes. It was in the mountains of Colorado. And to be able to kind of really, it is that holistic approach. And yes, I firmly believe in the ice baths and a variety of yoga, because that shows that how do you decompress? Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
How do you deal? It teaches you how to deal with that fight or flight piece of the brain.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
And that's what stress is just, I told somebody, I was talking to Marcos about this the other day, Gajito, that was on the show. And he asked me about, he asked me my definition of, what was that? I'm going to screw it up. Anyway, basically, like, I like the ice bath because every day it sucks. Mm-hmm. Like, it just, no matter how many times you do it, it's miserable. But I have to, like, defeat that little voice in my head about, like, ick, yuck, especially on, like, days like today. Like, I've been up since 6 this morning. I had a speaking engagement, and then I came over here and I didn't have a chance yet to go do my breathing in the ice bath. But when I get home, I'm going to do it. And because I still have to do it, right? It's part of that ritual that I'm talking about.
Yes. It's checking the box, but knowing physically and mentally that you still need to check it. And what the realization on the other side is going to be.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Exactly.
So for the executive coaching, as well as keynote speaking, kind of how companies are looking to be able to leverage is, I'm not a one and done person. So it's just don't bring me in for a workshop. It's like, if we're really going to do this, we're going to do it right. And that's talking to the C-suite. It's saying that we're going to take this next couple of months, we're really going to embrace mental health and make this part of our culture. Because right now, kind of talking about, May is always Mental Health Awareness Month. How do we lead up to that, as opposed to, it's May, next Wednesday we're going to have fruit on the table for Wellness Wednesdays? No, it goes beyond. And how do we make that part of the culture? Then for NAMI of Broward County, the walk is always in October. So how do you make a team for that? But then also, how can I come in and do workshops for an IT department is going to be very different with the people in the skill sets and the ability to in conversations than a human resource department.
Sure.
Because it's just different personalities. But if you have the top saying, we want to do this. Yeah. For me, I think having the experience working at universities and other different components of community, that I really enjoy bespoking the respective workshops. If it is going into a fitness facility, saying, all right, how are we going to do this? Because I can keep up pretty well with depending upon what you want to be able to do, but it's how do we bring it back to being authentic? Yeah. And how is this helping us better? And that goes back to, it's always about holistic health, and we can't miss the mental health component.
No, it's awesome. Well, Dr. Joe, hopefully we helped some starfish today.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that's right. That's
great. Ben. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, Bill.
Huge thanks to Dr. Joe for sharing his insights on mental and physical well-being. I hope you enjoyed this episode and took something valuable from it. Stay resilient, stay driven, and keep pushing forward.